This week's edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by AT&T, helping family, friends, and neighbors connect in meaningful ways every day. From the first phone call 140 years ago to mobile video streaming today, AT&T innovates to improve lives. And by New Jersey Business Magazine, providing the critical information needs for New Jersey's business community for more than 65 years.
Welcome to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm your host, Bob Considine. Well, all the economic data is in for 2020, and Focus New Jersey has released its first economic review of New Jersey's economy. Here to discuss the good, the bad, and the surprising is Nicole Sandelier, Executive Director of Focus New Jersey. Nicole, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
All right, so you picked a heck of a first year to do an economic review 2020 with all the shutdowns, but let's turn right to the impact of small business in terms of both their existence and actually their revenue impacts.
Sure. So in Q2 of 2020, because of the stay-at-home orders and closure of non-essential businesses, we saw nearly 60% of businesses, small businesses in the state, closed either temporarily or permanently.
60%?
60%
Wow.
In Q2.
Okay. Oh, Q2.
Yes.
Okay.
As we got to the end of the year, that number got better, but still is nowhere where we need it to be. And we know that 3 in 10 small businesses in the state were closed either temporarily or permanently.
Wow. And how about in terms of revenue impact?
In terms of revenue, at the end of the year, we saw a 35% decrease in small business revenue throughout the state.
Wow. Not good. Not good.
No.
So let's turn to overall unemployment claims. In the Focus New Jersey annual review of 2020, it states that more than 1.9 million people filed for unemployment claims and received more than $20 billion in benefits in 2020. That is staggering. But I was wondering, Nicole, what is the pace of that in 2020? Was it something that once the pandemic was really hitting hard, that's when we saw it and it gradually kind of resolved itself?
In order to talk about unemployment claims, we need to first talk about what the state of unemployment was before the onset of the pandemic. And that was that New Jersey was at historic lows for unemployment. That means that initial weekly claims were also historically low. When we get to April of 2020, the weekly unemployment claims skyrocketed to record unemployment rates.
Right.
We saw an incremental decrease every single month, especially after businesses started to reopen. However, we never got back to the point of few weekly unemployment claims like we had before the onset of the pandemic.
Right. So how do those numbers manifest itself in terms of different sections of New Jersey's population? Were any groups particularly hit harder or less hard?
There was certainly a disproportional impact for unemployment when we look at our Hispanic communities and our Black communities. For those two populations, unemployment was over 20% and just about 20% during Q2.
Wow. So what do you think will it take in 2021 to improve those numbers?
So I think there's a couple of things. First is folks need to get back to work. The second is the onset of the pandemic brought about the rapid adoption of artificial intelligence and technology that our businesses were talking about adopting in 5 to 10 years.
Right.
Well, businesses were forced to change their business strategy overnight, and that involved investing in technology. And so when we look at our low-skill workers who were disproportionately impacted in 2020, we need to figure out how we can upskill them and reskill them so that when they're ready to come back to work, there are jobs available for them that are actually higher paying, higher skilled jobs than prior.
Is that something that's going to take a long time, or is that something that can actually take place in a relatively quick amount of time?
I think the answer is both. I think we can give people the skills that they need now to get them back to work, but we've been talking about for years now this idea of lifelong learning, stackable credentials, and just continuously upskilling and reskilling yourself throughout your career.
Right. What did you find in terms of employment by industry? What areas were strong and maybe not so strong in 2020?
So at the end of 2020, the trade, transportation, and utilities industry employed nearly 900,000 people in the state. Wow. That was our largest industry for employment, perhaps not surprisingly. The largest difference, or the biggest difference from perhaps the Great Depression to what we saw in 2020 is the existence of the internet.
Right.
And therefore, businesses were able to adopt artificial intelligence and technologies and were really able to develop an e-commerce platform. Some businesses were already doing that, and their business model was just amplified, and other people were forced to convert into that e-commerce strategy. On the flip side, our leisure and hospitality industry was decimated by the pandemic. Many of those businesses are still operating under mandates and restrictions, which hopefully will start to get lifted and eased here soon.
Right. So, obviously we're at a time now when things are definitely look like they're going to be easing.
Yes.
Do you think leisure and hospitality is going to rebound in 2021?
I sure hope so. I think people are excited to get back to normal. And one of the ways you do that is by going out to a restaurant and eating. So I'm confident that people are going to be rushing to the bars, rushing to restaurants, and are just excited to get back to some sense of normalcy.
Right. So I wanted to turn to some pretty surprising data from your report. It turns out, through all the unemployment and all the kind of bad stuff that happened in 2020, it seemed that people actually had more income, more per capita income. How come?
So perhaps it's surprising to some, but the government did something that, as far as I'm aware, they had never done before, and that was stimulated the economy on a personal level. And so when the pandemic hit, folks were out of jobs at record rates. We saw sky-high unemployment rates. But the government's response to that at both the state and the federal level was, let's extend unemployment benefits. Let's have most of the households in the US and New Jersey receive some sort of federal stimulus payments. And so individuals aren't working, but they're receiving a lot of this extra stimulus from the government. That's resulted in personal income per capita increasing by nearly $5,000 in 2020.
Wow. So is the idea there, once people had that money, were they spending it or were they saving it?
So I think the idea would be for them to spend it in a way to stimulate the economy, stimulate businesses. We know that they also had $5,000 additional dollars in per capita to spend. And so naturally, if I had extra money, I would want to go out and spend it too. We saw that in the middle.
We'll try to arrange for that.
Yes. We saw that in the middle of Q2, consumer spending was dramatically down. However, towards the end of 2020, consumer spending was actually up over 2% at the end of the year.
For the year?
For the year.
Okay. So, when we talk about how people have more income, they have more spending, but then you have, as you said, small business revenue was down, nearly 36% for the year. So how do you square that? What happened?
So folks had this extra money, but they weren't comfortable going to the store, or they weren't comfortable going to the grocery store. So naturally, I've already said it twice today, they turned to their technology and to their internet. And so we're shopping on Amazon, we're shopping at Target online. We're looking to our businesses to see what they offer from the internet and are just having our products shipped to our house.
Right. How about GDP? How did New Jersey's GDP fare for the year?
So GDP was very interesting. If you remember at the onset of the pandemic, economists were really concerned about how GDP was going to fare out, not only in the nation, but for the state. What we saw was record contraction in GDP in Q2, both at the national level and the state level, followed by a rapid rebound in Q3. Despite that rapid rebound, though, we still saw a 4% decline in GDP over year over year. So 2019 compared to 2020. So we're not quite back at where we were pre-pandemic, but it is certainly not as bad as I think many economists initially anticipated.
Is it fair to ask you right now what Q1 in 2021 where our GDP is at? It's
fair to ask because the national numbers came out. And so we know that.
Good. It's so convenient.
We know that on the national level, we did pretty well. I'm very confident that New Jersey's GDP is going to be pretty close back to where we should be had there been no pandemic.
Right. All right, so we're going to take 2020 now, we're going to put it in a box, and we're going to put it in the closet, and we're never going to look at it again. But what do you want people to know for 2020, said and done?
So from an economic perspective, there's 4 major takeaways. The first is the impact of small business cannot be understated. We have 3 in 10 small businesses in our state that are closed either temporarily or permanently.
Right.
The second is our GDP. We had record contraction in GDP followed by a record rebound in GDP. Our third is our unemployment. Our unemployment rate, again, had record highs. We had a disproportional impact between Black and Hispanic workers. There was also a disproportional impact on the county level. We know that Atlantic City at one point had a 34% unemployment rate.
Wow.
34
in Atlantic City.
In just Atlantic City, 34%. The state average at that time was 16.8. So unemployment. That resulted in 1.9 million files for unemployment insurance and $20 billion in unemployment claims that are paid out to individuals. Wow. Billion with a B.
Yeah.
And last but not least is our personal income. So when you think about high unemployment, oftentimes you would equate that with, okay, well, individuals' incomes would get tighter or smaller, and so you have to tighten the belt, not loosen the belt, tighten the belt. But because of federal stimulus monies that are still in effect today, personal income per capita actually increased by $5,000. So it's actually opposite of what you would expect to happen during a normal economic downturn.
Wow. You know, before wrapping up, I know Focus New Jersey is going to continue to do these reports on a quarterly basis. So let's talk about where we are, 5 or 6 months into 2021 here. How are things looking with 2020 back in the rearview mirror now?
So things are starting to look better from some economic indicators, but also troublesome from others. Our unemployment is still at 7.7% for the state of New Jersey. It's a lot of people who aren't at work.
Right.
3 in 10 small businesses are still closed, either temporarily or permanently. And so we know from the small business perspective, individuals are not at work and businesses are still struggling. However, I like to talk about the economy as a tale of 2 economies. We've got our large corporations who may be publicly traded and the stock market is doing great. And so the corporation's bottom dollar might be better than they anticipated. But then we have small Main Street business that's really struggling to survive. And so I think that if we really want our economy to rebound and start to get back to normal and hopefully have 2020 just be a blip in our radar and economic phenomenons, we really need to reopen our economy fully. Obviously, we should continue to wear masks, but as vaccinations continue to become more readily available for everybody, we really need to get our economy rolling again and give our small businesses a fighting chance to survive.
How about unemployment? You did mention what our number is now. How is that compared to the rest of the country?
So New Jersey has a higher unemployment rate than the rest of the country. Why that is a great question. New Jersey is operating still. We know that restrictions are going to be lifted, but we're still operating under some restrictions. So part of it might be that, there's not jobs available. The other side of that argument is that we know that a lot of businesses are struggling to bring folks back to work. Just driving in today, I saw Wawa's offering a $500 subsidy or signing bonus to come back to work at Wawa. And so our businesses are really trying to recruit folks back. I think the problem is for a large subset of our population, those unemployment benefits just look far too good to pass up at this point.
Well, we'll see what happens. All right, well, this is great work, great information, Nicole. Thank you so much for all that. And for folks who don't know, NJBIA's independent nonpartisan research foundation is Focus New Jersey. We suggest you check it out at focusnj.org. And Nicole Sandelier, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Bob.
All right, and we'll be back right after this.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology and each other, that's built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only officially authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
These days, it's anything but business as usual. That's why working together is more important than ever. AT&T is committed to keeping you connected so you can keep your patients cared for, your customers served, your students inspired, and your employees closer than ever. Our network is resilient. Our people are strong. Our job is to keep your business connected. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do.
This edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by Jody Grenwald's Today is the Day Changemakers, providing content that will connect you to stories from people making a difference. Visit them on YouTube or at todayisthedayliveit.com.
Welcome back to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, with summer fast approaching, we're going to take you to the Grand Victorian Lady of the Jersey Shore. Harry and Maureen Typaldos are the owners and operators of the historic Grenville Hotel and Restaurant in Bay Head, and we're going to get their story about where they've been and where they're going in the summer of 2021. Let's take a look. So Harry, this building, the Grenville, goes all the way back to 1890, but let's go back to 2003. We'll bring it up a little bit. You see this place, a picture of it. You decide to come down, visit it, have lunch, and basically decided to purchase it after one visit. Take me back to that day.
You know, I still remember the day. It was in November. It was right after my birthday. And it was a cloudy, rainy day. And I walked in here and there was only one table having lunch. And I looked at the building and you just walked in and there was this sense of, I don't know. I mean, I still have it, but that first time feeling was just amazing. And I was with friends here and we sat down and they said, I had them meet here first to have lunch to see what they thought about the food and everything. And I walked in and they said, what do you think? And I said, I'm buying this place. Wow. And that was it. There was no, I had literally just walked, there's something about this building. There's an energy, there's something, and I just loved it.
Did you have any prior experience in restaurant or hotel management? Or anything?
No, I worked with hotels. I was an outside vendor for hotels for many, many years. So I saw the inner workings, but I'd never actually worked in a hotel and a restaurant.
And what was the reaction to that decision from your friends and your family?
Most people thought I was insane. They just said, you're nuts. You know, I was already a workaholic, so I was already working 6 days a week. And I kept saying, if you see this building, if you look, because back then the internet was just in its infancy. And I said, if you see this, and then if you walk in there, you'll understand. I said, if you don't, you just don't understand it. Yeah.
So was it a matter of needing to learn as you go? You know, did you hire specific staff to help you? How did
I did. I took the hotel playbook and I went by that. So I hired a general manager, I hired a restaurant manager, and so on and so forth. But in business, like everything else, it really comes down to you. It comes down to your personality. And we weren't here, and it suffered. You know, there were a lot of learning curves and whatnot. And you start coming down a little bit, and eventually you realize you're down here 6-7 days a week, and it kind of sucks you in, and that's how it happened.
I'm just wondering if you feel the weight of 100+ years of history of this place, probably just a handful of owners, and keeping that reputation up as a newbie, basically.
Yeah, it's tough because you can go back so many years and see, and we have, not from the Renault Winery, who I purchased it from, but in the 50s to the 80s, the Spurgats owned it. And Maureen will tell you, they've come, and last year they came for brunch. And we sat down with them and we chatted, and I've met a couple of the Spurgats, and they tell us what it was like. And they did the same thing that we do. You know, they lived in here, they ran it, it was part of their life. It was part of their sweat and blood at the same time. So for me anyway, you know, I just feel I'm carrying on the legacy of what they did in a different way, because the inside is completely changed from when they owned it, but the outside is the same as it's been, different color for 131 years.
And how about you, Maureen? What was your reaction to this place before you met Harry? And your impression of this place once you got to know him?
Absolutely. I would pass here. It was such a beautiful building, just amazing, the architecture. And then coming in, it was, I mean, like Harry said, you just feel, you know, you can feel everything that's been here for the last, you know, plus 100 years, so.
Right, wow. I'm gonna go back to let's go 2012 now. Sandy hits. I'm thinking at that point, that's probably the greatest challenge you've had here, correct?
Yeah.
Take me back to that. First of all, how much damage was done here, and how much were you closed?
So going a year before that, which was Irene in 2011, and that was the weekend before Labor Day weekend. Yep. You know, everyone evacuated. So I didn't evacuate during Irene, because I said, you know what? The building was redone in 87. The Renault did an amazing job in 87, 88. They ran new structural beams, everything across the board. So I knew structurally the building was going to be safe. And with Irene, we had damage to the building, but not much. So when Sandy hit, I said, you know what? I survived Irene, I can survive this. Everyone, again, you know, the insanity thing came out. And I stayed through Sandy. I mean, I was on the porch, literally watching Point Pleasant fly down Route 35. It was something you can't really explain in words. Our basement flooded. Structurally, we were okay. Our roofs were destroyed, the outside, a lot of windows and so on and so forth, but structurally we were fine. But our basements flooded, and that's where all our electronic components, wiring, plumbing, everything had to be gutted and redone. So we didn't have power until January, I think it was January 10th or 11th. Wow. And, you know, I stayed in the building, so it was, there were some cold nights there, but, you know, we made it through. But the challenge with Sandy was not so much during Sandy. It was the aftermath of Sandy. Right afterwards, where people were coming down just to gawk, just to see, not staying down here that much. Yeah. And then for the 2 years after that, when they were doing the reconstruction of 35, and they would literally just shut down 35, and people couldn't get into the building.
I remember that well.
Yeah, it was that was the tough. So 2012 was tough, but 2014 was probably harder than 2012.
That's interesting. Yeah. How about now? Let's go back to more recently. A year ago, pandemic hits. What was your situation before coronavirus kind of took over, and how did the past year go for you? Both of you can answer this.
I think we in February. One of our good friends had dropped off sanitizer and masks, and I said, well, I wonder why I don't think we need this. This is not going to happen. Right. And then when we were told to shut down, I think I wanted to just crawl up in a ball and cry, but we did the opposite. We made sure that let's keep going, and we were obviously shut down, but we made sure we kept our minds going and things we can do once we opened up, menu changes, things like that.
So almost like strategically you thought, well, this is an opportunity to work on some things while we're going to be down, I guess.
Exactly. We obviously couldn't do large projects or anything of that nature. Right. So it was a lot of paint, a lot of repair, a lot of this, a lot of that. But it gave us that time to regroup. And I'm more analytical than reactionary. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Right. But you analyze everything and you say, okay, what if the customers come back? Well, we're going to need X amount of things done. So we just sat there, and it became a work every day. You just so whereas people had months off, we were actually working 7 days a week. Right. And when we reopened in June, it was Memorial Day weekend that they opened the hotel, but it was really didn't affect us. But when the hotel opened up in June and then the restaurant, the wave, the onslaught of people coming in was overwhelming sometimes. And we were prepared for it, because we had really thought it out for X amount of months.
Plus you had a great advantage in having a veranda, which you could actually eat outside.
The veranda was probably the deal maker, deal breaker for us, because people were coming here. You obviously couldn't sit inside, and nobody wanted to, but people were very reluctant or hesitant to sit in parking lots or sit in makeshift outside eating areas. Our veranda, which most people overlook to a certain extent because there's other places, all of a sudden became a $1 billion property, not $1 million property. Right. And you couldn't say, oh, do you want to sit inside? Because there was no inside seating. Right. So people would just sit and wait. And we were like, oh my God.
And now that things are starting to loosen up and we'll hear some more restrictions soon, the release of some restrictions soon. Are people still wanting to be outside?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Saturday it was beautiful out there, and we had a lot of guests that sat out there for dinner, which was really nice. So
I'd say the majority of people still want to sit outside.
Right. How about weddings? I mean, we've heard countless stories of wedding facilities needing to close or push back people, and all kinds of mess between people want their wedding a certain day and they can't make it happen. Did you guys have any of that?
For us, we ended up doing, specifically last summer up through December, a lot of micro weddings, which for us, it's a perfect spot. We're not a larger venue. We do some larger weddings, but nothing, over 120 people. So we were able to cut down. And so for that, we were very blessed. I think about all the larger venues that had to actually not even open up. We were able to go ahead and continue on.
Did you find people wanted to come here because they couldn't go somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. Or they were actually still doing it on their day, and then this coming year, have their larger one this year. So we definitely had a lot of brides and grooms.
Right. Let's talk about weddings here. To me, it seems like this is the perfect place to have a wedding from the standpoint of you got the ocean 300 feet away. You've got the garden, you've got the veranda, you've got the restaurant, you've got the accommodations. I mean, what's not for people to love to have basically a one-stop shop wedding, basically?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. I mean, we have everything here. The one thing that would stop people is when they have larger weddings that we can't accommodate, which, 100, anything over 120, because when 120, we open up our doors, we can use the veranda. So when people call and they say, 150 people, we can't, we could try to do it, but we're not going to have the experience that they want to do. But when you have a wedding up to give or take about 100 people, it's just an amazing place, because when they take all the rooms upstairs, it's almost like when we rented a house and everyone's staying in the house on 3 different floors, and then we're having a wedding downstairs.
How many rooms do you have in here?
29.
29, wow, it's that many. So we're about to hit the summer of 2021. Looks like restrictions are going to be going down. What's your level of optimism for the year? Both of you.
Through the roof.
Yeah.
It's literally through the roof. You look at, every year I'm a numbers guy, so I just try to look at the numbers, try to figure out what's going on. You're literally throwing the numbers out the window, because the same way that last year you threw them out the window, you couldn't figure out what was going to go on. This year you're doing the same thing too, because pre-bookings are through the roof. Monthly sales for the hotels are through the roof. Same thing with banquets, same thing with restaurants. And they're all being pushed into the summer, into the fall. So the level of optimism is extremely high.
How about you, Maureen?
Yeah, I can see now, watching everyone booking for the summer and coming down, and we do have a lot of repeat customers, and they're super excited. Some of them that weren't able to get here last year because of COVID are already booked now, and I'm so happy to be able to have them come back and enjoy. So.
Yeah, there's probably a level of eagerness, I would think. People are like, all right, it's been a year. Yeah. Let's go do something.
We did the same thing. We took 4 days off and we went upstate.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. It was a horrible. And we slept. We literally slept for 4 days. We had a beautiful cabin on 300 acres of wood. We took our dogs up there and we just slept for 4 days. We just needed to rejuvenate. And we were just so happy to be able to get away too.
Right. So in closing, we always hear from historic hotel owners or bed and breakfast folks, restaurant folks. It's literally, if they own the place and operate it, it's 24/7 all the time. I wanted to ask you folks, how do you square that level of work with the satisfaction of really making an impression on people's lives in terms of they're never going to forget an experience here? What is that like for you?
Because we're actual innkeepers, so we work, we actually work everything that we possibly can in 7 days a week. For myself, and then I'll let Harry speak, but I thoroughly enjoy it. Guests come and they leave as family. So it really, for me, it's so satisfying, and I enjoy every moment, and I love making them happy.
Yeah, and it's a trade-off. We live in the building. I have a place upstairs, and work becomes incorporated in your personal life. Yeah. So there's that melding of the two of them. You can't turn it off and say, I'm not working anymore. You're always working, you're always doing things. But if you enjoy what you do, it's customer service and you enjoy people, you like talking to people, you learn about them. We have so many people that are like, hey, when you're up by us, come and visit, come and stay. And it's great. It's not just work, you become family, friends, whatever you want to call it. So I'm happy in that sense. I love doing what I'm doing, so I don't consider it work. I consider it fun. Most of the time I consider it fun.
All right, a great visit there with Harry and Maureen Typaldos of the Grenville in Bayhead. Go check them out. In closing, we take you to another one of NJBIA's New Good Neighbor Award winners. This time around, we take you to the STEM Student Research Center in Bergen Community College. Have a look.
The STEM Student Research Center at Bergen Community College is really unlike anything in the entire country. And to tell you the truth, that's not PR speak either. This facility is unlike any other because there isn't another one like it in the entire country.
Last year when we opened up the STEM Student Research Center to the students at Bergen Community College, it was an eye-opening experience to see how they observed all the technology that we had at their reach. 3D printers, PLA-based, SLA, resin-based 3D printers, laser cutters, laser engravers, circuit board printers, as well as this baby right here. We have a CNC, one of the smallest CNC right now in the market. That way students can also work with a very multifaceted material, which is metal. So not only plastic and wood, but they can also manufacture their own parts with a CNC machine at the STEM Student Research Center.
Let's face it, this is where the money is for a lot of professions. This is where the jobs are for a lot of professions. So we want to put our students in a position where they can succeed. And when you have an opportunity like this to provide students with the space to begin working on the kinds of things that they would do themselves in industry or in a profession or in a career, you're allowing them to get a jump start on that. So again, this is a pathway, a pipeline to careers that will help our students obviously achieve their goals and go where they want to go.
All right, some impressive high-tech learning there at Bergen Community College. We thank them for their work, and we thank you for joining us on NJBIA's Minding Your Business. We'll see you next time.